Okay, good. Yes. Bobo Yoruba dada. Mo ti lè jẹ́ olùkọ́ Yorùbá. Ṣùgbọ́n that's all right.
Okay, he goes by the name Solar 7, and he says, if Jollof no day, party no day. That is that. Before then, you were hearing that spoken word piece by one of the young rising spoken word artists in Ghana. I told you he's a student at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and he's doing so amazingly well, and he's going to launch a new album called Megbona. Megbona means I'm coming. Yes. And he has already dropped the first album, which is Agbo, because he was entering and he need to seek your permission before he enters. So he goes by the name Sephogan. Sephogan is the name. You can get his first album, which is free online to download, which is the Agbo one. Today, as I told you earlier on, I have Dr. Obadelé Kambon on his return back to the show Good Morning Africa as our usual guest, and I'll also have Advocate Boabin. I don't know when he changed his name to Advocate Boabin, and he also gonna grace the show this morning. You know, I told you we are going to look at the importance of African knowledge. Yes, with Dr. Obadelé Kambon. With Boabin, we're going to look at some of the issues concerning the building of Cathedral and the setting up of assembly plant of Volkswagen in Ghana at a time where Kantanka has been struggling to make his car affordable. Government has the impetus to sign an MOU with a foreign company that is so old, experienced in the field, to come and compete a baby industry. Then government say that we want Ghana beyond aid. So I don't know. But first of all, let me open the microphones and greet my guest this morning. Okunini, me watching.
Yeah, me have to say.
Or microphone, or Mr. Mills, if you're listening to me, maybe come in.
I feel yeah.
Yeah, I feel what papa.
Yo, this is my film.
Say the better as well, my.
Yo.
Boabin, okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Get closer to your microphone. It's been a long time.
I know it's been a long time.
When did you start activism?
Well, I've been an activist for a long time. I mean, when it comes to things like Africa, things that involve Africans and things that, yeah. So we've been there. Just that maybe we've not been that active and out there for people to see that yes, this is what we're doing.
Oh, okay. That's cool. That's cool. Now at least I've seen another DJ who's an activist apart from me.
Exactly.
All right. So we'll come back to the Cathedral and the Volkswagen issue later part of the show. But let's go to Dr. Kambon, who has been here for quite a long time. Doc, when you say we should look at the importance of African knowledge, where do we start? Because the African knowledge is so many. But unfortunately and sadly, it is something that the African themselves don't even know that we have one.
Yeah, it's true. I actually want to give a series of quotes from throughout Africa and the African world. And the first one is actually in Yoruba. And it goes like this: it's Amoti Akobako Gbele Tabakota. Amoti Akobako Gbele Tabakota. And it translates to, a child who is not taught will sell the house that we have built. Meaning this is something that's ours, but because that child doesn't know.
Whoa, the child that is not taught will sell the house that we built.
Exactly. So no matter what you built, industries, whatever, factories, and this is exactly what we see or have seen here in Ghana, that we had so many industries and factories, but because there was miseducation, diseducation, and anti-education, the children who were to receive that as an inheritance just frittered it away. And this is exactly what we see going on with the VW thing going down that will be discussed. Another proverb is Abiko, Akoigba, Itani wanting Kogbonwale. Abiko, Akoigba, Itani wanting Kogbonwale. And it translates to one who was born but wasn't taught, the one who was taught but didn't accept that teaching, that they have to learn wisdom outside in public. Meaning that you could have learned it at home, you could have learned it from your parents when they taught you. However, if you don't accept those teachings, you go out and you have to learn it the hard way out in public. Another proverb is Ndochdu fate yonam, and now that's in Wolof, Ndochdu fate yonam, and that translates to water does not forget its path. Water does not forget its path. And this is essentially saying that we had such a rich history that is really unsung, a legacy that's really unsung, but no matter what, water will find its level. So this is, what we're striving to, that, the vestiges are still here, even though the miseducation is there, that we still have elders, we still have some of these proverbs. There's a proverb in Kiswahili, Mwacha asili ni mtumwa, Mwacha asili ni mtumwa, and that is one who does not hold on to his culture is a slave, right? So one who rejects their own culture is a slave by definition. There's a proverb in Wolof, again, that's Senegal and Gambia mainly, where they say, Khamsa bob morgana kula koywach. Khamsa bob morgana kula koywach. And it translates to knowing oneself is better than having someone tell you about yourself.
You knowing yourself is better than somebody telling you about yourself.
Exactly, exactly. In Chi, of course, we're here in Ghana, so we'll come back to here. Obinima obichire. So that one is very self-explanatory for much of the audience.
Okay, so for our listeners out there, yes, you know that Dr. Kambon is back. He's now taking us through some wise sayings across the whole of Africa, and that's what he's doing. So after that, then we switch into
discussion mode,
discussing other issues. Yeah, continue.
Right, so all of these are just to give us a little bit of background for our discussion today. Now, there's another quote, which is ancient times have something to say, ancient times have something to teach. The other one, Obinima Obichre, that one is if someone doesn't know, then someone will teach that person. Now I want to go to Congo, right? Lusala wa nuni yande wampanalo.
What language is that?
Kikongo.
Kikongo, okay.
Guess where Kikongo is spoken?
Okay.
Congo. If you listen very clearly. Right, so Kikongo is the art of Congo, the language of Congo. So that one translates to birds have feathers because they were passed on to them by other birds. And by the same token, we have knowledge and wisdom because that was passed on to us from our ancestors. But imagine if it's not passed on, picture a bird without feathers. How will it fly?
And how would it even look?
That's exactly it. It would look crazy, just like how we look crazy. There's a proverb in Chi, I'll come back here to Ghana. And that's to say that if you reach the outskirts of a town and you encounter that children are singing songs, it's their elders who taught them those songs. It's not just, they are making up something. So again, this goes into that intergenerational transmittance of knowledge. There's a proverb, I'll go back to Congo. Kamusiko lenda kituka nganga vokalendi vangako. And it translates to no one can become an nganga, a specialist, if one cannot excel or do what one's kinganga requires of one, which is their field of specialization, their teacher. So it means that it's not just enough to say, oh, you're a doctor or you're a professor or whatever, that it's action-based, that it's behavior-based, so it's based on what you are able to actually do and able to accomplish. And then I'll close with this one, and then we'll go to discussion mode. Lukobelwa kinganga kalusom wangako, and that is a degree of specialization is not bought, it has to be earned. But all of this is wisdom from throughout the African continent, and I will go to the African world. So those were the ones out of the continent, but now there's a quote from Farrakhan where it says, he who gives you the diameter of your knowledge prescribes the circumference of your activity.
I love that one. I've been seeing it.
Very good.
Yeah.
And it's very important. So if you picture a circle and the diameter is this wide, this means your activity goes like this. But if the diameter is much wider, this means that your activity, there's a similar proverb that says a cow grazes where it is tied. So picture a cow tied to a post, that it can only graze as far as that rope allows. But once you have freed yourself, that's when you're able to move.
Then there are considered McCoy and the man can be there. Omar Johnson also says that I don't dance unless I like the music. I don't itch. I don't scratch unless I itch. Yes.
Yeah, and that's a reference, you know, when they talk about people scratching when it don't itch and, you know, dancing just, you know, for white folks and those types of things. That's what he's referring to for those who may not get the context. And then finally, Nanakwa David Whitaker, in this quote that Dr. Runoko Rashidi has popularized, he says, what you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself. What you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself. And what you know of yourself depends on what you have been told. Right? So it's a chain, you know, one depends on the other. So once you've been told about yourself, then you can know about yourself. Once you know about yourself, then you can think well of yourself. And then once you think well of yourself, then you can do something for yourself. Right? Okay. Now, what happens when none of that is there? What happens when you're not told of yourself? Right? What happens is we end up, just like the first proverb said, instead of, you know, protecting our own industry, then we go protect the industries of others. And, you know, once we go to that topic, you know, I have some other thoughts on that same subject. But all of the things that we complain about are as a result of the factories that we have. What factories do we have here? We have factories that are designed to create anti-Africans, and then we call them schools, right? So when we look at statistics that show that there are more Ghanaian doctors practicing outside of Ghana than in Ghana, right? This means that the whole miseducation system, which should have been doing something that helps to enrich us as African people, it rather creates a type of people who their highest aspiration is to go serve their enemies, their colonial enemies.
Do they even know that there's an enemy?
That's the whole point. Because where would they learn it? You understand? That would be the role of the school to say, you know what, you are here, we are teaching you, we are investing all of this money in you so that you can enrich our society. But rather than doing that, the miseducation that they get teaches them to go and work for someone else, go across the Mediterranean, the Sahara, all these things, just to go and slave for someone else. And this is, again, all intentional, that these so-called schools are factories that are designed to create all of the problems that we complain about. So the problems that we complain about are not the cause, they are rather the end result of a calculated, intentional process that's designed to create these types of people. So when we say corruption, corruption isn't the problem, corruption is the end result of the problem, right? So we have to start thinking of a causative analysis, a cause system analysis. So what's the cause that created people who are corrupt? You understand? And when we don't ask that question, we just say, oh, well, it's just natural, it's just normal. No, these are not natural things. This is the end result of not knowing who you are or whose you are, that lack of self-knowledge.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are still tuning to S Live Africa, and this is Good Morning Africa. And our guest this morning is our usual guest who went on a break and has come back. That's Dr. Obadele Kambon, a lecturer, a researcher, a research fellow at the Institute of African Studies at the African Studies Department at the University of Ghana, Legon, and he is taking us through some wise sayings across the whole of Africa. We also have Advocate Boabin in the studios. Yes, you'll hear him very soon. So, Doc, are you done with the proverbs or the wise sayings?
Yeah, that's just to set the framework of where we're going for this morning.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So now let's do a bit of the importance of African knowledge.
Right.
Then you move on.
Very good. So when we're talking about the importance of African knowledge, we're talking about how can we set up a factory that's designed to create Africans who are race first, Africans who want the best for the black people who are here in Africa and throughout the world, regardless of location. Then we have to create a different process, African-centered education. Now, I have one of my former students. She went to the University of Ghana, and she interviewed the students and professors there, and she asked them a very simple question. She says, "Have you heard of Julius Caesar?" "Oh yes, of course." "Yeah, of course. What? Yes, of course." Then she asked them, have you heard of Imhotep? And they say, who? What is that? Right? Now, Imhotep is the world's first multi-genius in the history of the entire world. Now, if we had some type of objective school system, don't you think that's important information for you to know? However, we don't get a chance to know it because he was black, right? Black like all the rest of us. So there are so many, things like that. The oldest book in the history of the world was written here in Africa. That's the Instructions of Ptahhotep. Now, how many of us get that in primary or JHS or SHS? How many of us get that information? That's very important for all of humanity to know. But when we don't get that information, how do we start to think of ourselves? Then we think, oh, well, we just got the writing recently. Thank the British for bringing us out of the jungles. You understand? However, we don't understand that we created writing systems many times over. So the oldest writing system in the history of the world is called Medu Neter, and that was invented right here in Africa. We also have the Meroitic writing system, the Nsibidi writing system, the Vai writing system. We can go on Tifinagh writing system. All of these are writing systems all throughout the continent. We have the Ge'ez writing system. So all of these are writing systems, but this isn't part of our curriculum, right? However, it is part of our curriculum at Abibifahodie at Disfiabia. We have African Liberation School, and that is in North Legon at the Lion House. You can even look it up on the map.
Today we're going to talk more about them.
Yeah, we definitely have to, because it's not enough to just complain about the problems. We are actually offering the solutions, and I'm going to give this. We need to stick this all over town, because people have to know that there are ways out, there are solutions. There are those of us who are doing this work. And, when we just complain and say, look at how bad this, system is, that's where we get to a point where you can have a whole president who is saying, let's build a cathedral to worship an imaginary white man. What type of insanity is that? And it's, we oftentimes blame the leaders, but the leaders are extracted from the followers. You understand?
Exactly.
There is absolutely no difference. The same person who's saying, look at our leaders, that person would, the only difference is opportunity, right? If you put that person in the position of president, they would do the exact same thing. Because what do they do every Sunday but go to a place to worship an imaginary white boy on a stick? If they're not worshiping an imaginary white boy on a stick, they're praying to a rock.
Be careful. This is somebody who is about 2,000 years. You can't call him a boy.
So I don't know whether to call it a boy or a man when it's imaginary. You understand?
Exactly.
It's like saying the elder Easter bunny. There's no such thing as an Easter bunny. So, what are we really talking about here? So that's one. And those who aren't praying to an imaginary white boy on a stick are praying to a rock 5 times a day. This is the worldwide idol worship of praying to a rock in the desert sand 5 times a day. But then you say you're against idolatry, and then you're kneeling down and praying to a rock. What exactly is going on here? So, it's not the difference between, this isn't even to pick on MPP or NDC, that all of them have the same miseducation process.
Exactly.
So when they come to power, they do the same miseducation things. They do the same things that they are designed to do, calculated to do, to worship, these colonial enemies. I sometimes hear people say, these are our colonial masters. I say, you should never call them that. You should say exactly what they are. You should be truthful. You should say that these are your colonial enemies. Look at what they've done to you. Over 10 million African people killed in the Congo. The very first Holocaust by Germany was not against the so-called Jews. It was against the people of Namibia, the Herero people and the Nama people. I just read a book called The Kaiser's Holocaust, Germany's Forgotten Genocide, where it goes into this, how the first concentration camps were not Buchenwald or, Auschwitz, that the first concentration camps were there in Namibia, here in Africa. So this provided the training ground of this is how to exterminate a people. Von Trotha issued this extermination order where he said the men, the women, the children, that they went into the desert, and then when they came back from thirst, they said, no, we told you this is extermination order. And then they machine gun children, they machine gun women, they machine gun the elderly down in the desert there. And you can still see their bones to this day, these shallow graves, you understand? Mass graves, these islands. So these are the things that we're not taught. And when we don't understand that these are our colonial enemies, this is how we end up basically praying to them, where someone like a Merkel can come and say, oh, you know what, let's destroy your burgeoning automotive industry. And then we say, oh, yes, wonderful. You understand? This is the end result.
This is sad.
So that if there's nothing else I want people to come away with, I want them to understand that these decisions by Nana Akufo-Addo are not in a vacuum. that these are not just happenstance to create people who mislead us, that this is the calculated end result of not knowing anything about your own history, but then knowing everything. If you ask him about the Magna Carta, he can tell you. If you ask him about the instructions of Kagimni, he will say, what is a Kagimni? What is a Harjadef? You understand? These are the very oldest books in the history of the world. The very first female ruler. Sometimes I hear, you know, these wannabe feminists saying whatever, but they don't know that the very first female ruler of the oldest nation state in the history of the world was right here in Africa, and that's Sobek Neferu. And even before that, you had regents, before outright rulers, who ruled as, you know, in the stead of the ruler who was not there. So these are the things that we are not taught, but these are things that as children we should learn. You understand? Why should you be 20 years old and 30 years old and 40 years old, and it's the very first time that you're hearing the names of some of the most important human beings to walk on the face of the planet? It's not just because they're African. It's that if you are the author of the oldest book in the history of the world, don't you think that that's something that everybody in the world should know? But then we have to ask ourselves the question of how come we don't know it? Well, it's because they're black. And if you did know it, then you wouldn't be bending over and opening up your cheeks for Angela Merkel to stick in a VW. This is the problem that we're suffering from right now. So these are the things that we have to know and have to understand.
Let me go to Boabeng. How did you receive this news?
Firstly, before I go on, before I talk about that, I'm just amazed. I'm just blown by doctor's submissions. I mean, he's right. He's right. I mean, I can tell you, some of these things I never knew until last year.
I'm telling you. When you signed up to his website.
Yes, to his website and other sources, because I didn't know about certain history. I was like, so all these things, are these things there?
Because you know what?
We haven't even scratched the surface either.
You know what? Because you're my friend, we were all in SFM those days.
Yes.
So, and I knew your stance on so many things. So, but you started sending me something on WhatsApp, and I'm like, where has this guy gone to? Is he okay?
More than okay.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I got to know all this. I'm like, why? I mean, our education system is a sham. You know,
yes.
It's something that we inherited, which was designed purposely for, you know, I mean, as our colonial enemies. Exactly. It was skewed towards them. You get it? So because I don't know why. I mean, you become something. You become a doctor or something, and you cannot add to your society. You cannot make any impact. You get my point? Yeah. So I mean, I really want to thank Doctor for his depth knowledge, and we are learning. I'm really learning every day.
Exactly.
If you look at some of my friends now on Facebook, you would know that these are people.
The circles, exactly. Yeah.
So you engage yourself in people like that, and you get more. I mean, more knowledge. You get to know yourself. Yeah, and getting to the church cathedral issue, I'm like, I mean, why? What is happening to us? What are our priorities anyway?
Right.
And I was like, so I mean, the clergy says that is Akufado's legacy, and I'm like, really? Like, seriously? Look, people,
legacy for God, right?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, first of all, you ask yourself, are you in a Christian state or it's not a secular state?
It's a secular state. Yeah, we're in a secular state.
And then what is this cathedral? What is this? Whatever. I mean, you see. So I just don't understand. And I think I can take from what Doc is saying, because we all came out of that same system, and no matter what, even if you put somebody like me without knowledge of, I mean, myself and all this, I would skew towards what he is doing. I would almost do what he's doing. You see,
or even better.
I'm even more crazier.
Put a mosque on the cathedral.
I'm telling you. I mean, look, people built Akosombo Dam. People built atomic energy commission. Where, I mean, unfortunately, because of our ineptitude and everything, look at what has happened to the atomic engines. Anyway, that's another matter for
another discussion.
About. Okay. You see,
Now,
No,
if
please.
I can, I just want to share a quick quote by Nana Carter G. Woodson. Our ancestors, we append the title Nana to them. And he says, if you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his action. When you determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you make a man feel that he is inferior, you do not have to compel him to accept an inferior status, for he will seek it himself. If you make a man think that he is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there is no back door, his very nature will demand one. Now, this is quite profound.
No, I want you to take it all over again.
No problem. No problem. If you can control, and this is Nana Carter G. Woodson, and if you haven't read that book, The Miseducation of the Negro, everyone in your listening audience should,
I have it.
Wonderful. Everyone in your listening audience should have it and read it and take notes as I'm talking, because this isn't what you've gotten in primary. This isn't what you've gotten in JHS. This isn't what you're going to get in the Trotro or in the school or in the university for that matter. Because the professors there have no idea of what we're talking about. But I will continue. He says, if you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his action. When you determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you make a man feel that he is inferior, you do not have to compel him to accept an inferior status, for he will seek it himself. If you make a man think that he is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there is no back door, his very nature will demand one. Now, I want to continue another quote from him, and it's very brief, but he says...
From the same book?
From the same book, Miseducation of the Negro. And, you know, sometimes I hear people say, oh, well, our elders didn't teach us, or the generation before failed us, and so forth. It's not about what they've given to you. It's now about what are you going to give to yourself. And he says, philosophers have long conceded, however, that every man has two educators, that which is given to him and the other which he gives himself. Of the two kinds, the latter is by far the more desirable.
Exactly.
Indeed, all that is most worthy in man he must work out and conquer for himself. It is that which constitutes our real and best nourishment. What we are merely taught seldom nourishes the mind like that which we teach ourselves. So it's not enough to say, oh, well, the generation before, they were in colonial schools. Like some of the elders, they were literally being taught by the British that you did nothing. You were in a jungle swinging. Now, when you put that person in a leadership position, what are they going to give to you? You understand? So you have a naked bird with no feathers going to now, what are they going to pass down to you? How can you fly? You understand? So this is exactly what we're talking about. If we have a featherless chicken, it cannot give birth to, they say, okotonwanoma. So how can you fly and your father is okoto? They say, okoto rianeme riahwan obejene yonko atata. So that. So who will, well, let me explain it. That if you have the crab who is crawling around and the child who is also crawling around, who is going to teach the other one how to walk? Right? So this is the issue. So I don't want to hear these people saying, oh, the generation before, they didn't help me. Oh, my parents didn't help. Later for that. Right now, you have an internet that you can go to. And I hear you all talking about your WhatsApp and your Facebook. You know I'm here to correct that. Because we have our own, I created my own social media network. So Marcus Garvey, he said, you know, he looked around for where are men of big affairs, where are nations, where are flags. He said, I didn't see them, so I created my own. Right? You understand? So what we're doing is when we're talking about we're being conscious, you're not there raising people's consciousness. They're there lowering your African behavior. You understand? Because what you're doing is that you're supporting these exact same white people called Mark Zuckerberg. He's going to flip that money and build prisons. He's going to flip that money and buy bullets to shoot your black brothers and sisters. So what you are doing is not helping other people become more conscious and brave. What they're doing is they're keeping you locked into this white platform instead of building your own platform. What are you going to pass down? Are you going to pass down your Facebook page to your children? Are you going to pass on your WhatsApp line and your WhatsApp groups to your children? What are you creating for yourself? That's what Mark Zuckerberg created for his, you know, little fake Jew children. You understand? So instead of supporting these white enemies, we must be race first. You understand? In Kemet, we would have said, Kemetiu Imhat, black people in the front. You understand? But what I've realized and what I've seen is that we're not race first. We are self-gratification first. If I click it and people give me likes, I say, yes, look at me, clap for me. You understand? but we must be race first. We have to support our own. You understand? If you can't create your own, I've created one. I've invested thousands into it. So that's what you need to support. If you can't create your own school, I've created the school. You understand? Myself and my wife, Dr. Samari Kamara, where can you go where it's a primary school and you have PhDs teaching you? And not these piled high and deep PhDs, not these permanent head damage PhDs, but people who actually have the information. They say that that degree of specialization is not caught in Kikongo, the proverb I share. That this is not, oh, someone gave me a degree, clap for me. This is, what have you actually learned? What's that second education that you've given to yourself? You understand? What I've learned, I was fortunate that my parents, they had an African-centered bookstore and cultural center. And from that, all of the luminary speakers, Dr. Charles S. Finch, talking about ancient African medicine, he actually showed images of surgery being done hundreds of years ago. You understand? The first white explorers were documenting, oh, they're doing brain surgery. And it was successful. You understand? These are the things that we would actually know about. The oldest medical text, the Kahun Gynecological Papyrus. How many of us even know it exists? Very few. Beyond knowing that it exists, it's not just enough to pat yourself on the back. Have you read it? You understand? What are the lessons in there of how to treat yourself, how to heal yourself so you're not going to the pharmacy and then taking something that ends up making you have hallucinations? Sometimes they give the advertisements and they say, oh, side effects may include a heart attack, stroke. You understand it? What kind of side effect is this? It's worse than I'm trying to cure a headache, and then you're saying this may cause a heart attack. What is this?
Dr. Eden will say, when I hear people have heart attack, I'm like, can you imagine you are attacking your own heart?
What is
the
this?
very thing your body, your whole life depends on. Anyway, we'll go for a short skid, and when we are back, we'll continue the show. This is Good Morning Africa, and if you are listening, you know it's getting hot, because Dr. Obadele Kambon is here. He is a lecturer at the University of Ghana, a research fellow at the University of Ghana, and also he is the CEO of Abibifahodie.com, one of the biggest black conscious.
All black, 100% black. If you're not black, you cannot even get on.
Social media platform, yes, right there. So, and if you want information, if you want to rediscover yourself, if you think your ancestors didn't give you any education, go to Abibifahodie.com, sign up, and you can learn and do unlearn as well. So let's go for this skit from Seth Sefogan called "What If."
What if? What if I wasn't a human? What if she wasn't a woman? What if your father wasn't a man and your mother never existed? What if your ancestors never lived? What if apes never transformed? What if evolution never took place? What if the first woman God created wasn't called Eve or the first man Adam? What if he hadn't planted a tree in the middle of the garden? What if he hadn't named the garden Eden? What if Adam and Eve hadn't eaten the forbidden fruit, realized they were naked, and hid from their maker? What if? But they said the Creator is all-knowing. So, is he a mistaken creation? Is it negligence on the side of the Creator? Or did the Creator know and yet wanted it to turn out so? If so, why then does he have to sentence the woman and the serpent to hard labor, pairing them apart, saying, woman, your offspring shall crush the head of the serpent, and you, serpent, your offspring shall bite the heel of the woman? What if? What if yesterday hadn't existed to give rise to today? Then tomorrow wouldn't be a day to look forward to, and what is happening now, right here, would not be a possibility. So, what if? What if Judas Iscariot's ultimate role on earth was to betray Christ so that all Christians would be saved through his crucifixion? What if he hadn't played that role? And now that he has played it too, what fate awaits him? Will he be punished or will he be pardoned? What if we refuse to talk about these things? What if I never wrote this piece? What if mankind never attempted to understand the world around him? I mean, what if 1 + 1 wasn't 2? 2 + 2, 4. 4 + 4, 8. What if A wasn't A, B wasn't B, C wasn't C, and that there was another alphabet after Z? How would you have called the pen? And how would you have called the head? What if the very principles upon which mathematics, physics, and biology were all founded turn out to be false? What if everything that you and I know to be right actually turned out to be wrong, and that you and I were living a life of a lie? What if it wasn't Shakespeare that wrote all those plays he was attributed? What if it wasn't Newton that discovered gravity? What if it wasn't Einstein that proposed the theory of relativity? What if
that's why
a Christian were to be born a Muslim a Buddhist, the Buddhist a traditionalist, the traditionalist an atheist? How would we have argued out our faith? Would you have accepted that mine is better than yours? Or will I accept that yours is better than mine? What if? What if everything that happens to you and I, we pause for a moment and ask ourselves this simple question: what if? You see, if death and what comes after life is glorious, then it is only right for me to say that death
what we are back
and what comes after is even greater.
Can we continue still on the African knowledge?
Yeah.
What if I decide
I want to talk about the school specifically. Some of the things that we don't know that we should know, and then how we learn those at the school. But I also want to talk about, I gave a talk on the types of vehicles driven by heads of state. Vehicles driven by heads of state, and I want to segue that into the discussion about the cars. So the head of Italy drives an Italian car, the head of Germany drives a German car, Japan drives a Japanese car, America drives an American car. But here, look at her. So I want to give some of those stats.
Then you wouldn't have heard the speech titled, "What If?" What if?
I'm live on Abibifahodie. Someone typed, what if none of that is true?
Yes. Okay, so shout out to the one listener or watching on Abibifahodie Kasa is saying, what if all of that is not true? That is true. You know, what you're saying, your question is actually right. So, greetings to all my Abibifahodie Kasa brothers and sisters out there. We are happy to have Doc here, and he's teaching us this morning. Wabin is so happy to meet his I'm telling you. Yes. So that is that. We are back on, and we're going to continue from Dr. Obadele Kambon. He has a lot more to tell us about how to know and take serious the knowledge of Africa. So, Doc, let's continue.
Very good. Now, I want to start with a quote. It's attributed to Harriet Tubman. The oldest source I could find actually dates to Dorothy Winbush's book, My Soul Looks Back, Lest I Forget, a collection of quotations by people of color. And in it, she quotes Harriet Tubman as saying, "I freed thousands of slaves. I could have freed thousands more if they had known they were slaves." You understand? This means that you have to even know that you're in a position of bondage before you can even start to think, I need to get free. Well, right now, because we don't see the shackles and we think we're free. And I want us to get out of mental emancipation, freeing our minds. Why do I say that? Because it has to go beyond that to now freeing our bodies. You understand? What about the clothes that we wear? What about the languages that we speak? What about the foods that we eat? It's not enough to say, oh, my mind is free, but look at me doing all this anti-African behavior, that we need to free the body. What is the behavior that we're behaving, that we're acting out every single day? So this is exactly what we have to know. Now, just in terms of the things that we don't know or don't learn in the public cesspool system, some call it the public fool system, is information such as the oldest historical text in the history of the world is King Scorpion, 3250 BCE. This is over 5,000 years ago. Now, if I say King Scorpion, how many people have even looked at that text before? You understand? So this is what we would need to know. But we don't know about King Scorpion, but then we'll hear about Herodotus. Have you heard that name, Herodotus?
Yeah, I was introduced to it in senior high school when I was doing history. Of
course.
And in the history, Ghanaian senior high school history books, Herodotus is said to be the father of history.
Right. So when we call someone the father of history, can you give birth to your own great-great-grandfather? How can you do it? Because we're talking about King Scorpion 5,000 years ago. Herodotus is about 2,400 years ago. You understand? So how can you give birth to history when history, the oldest historical document, is a good 2,000 to 3,000 years older than you? You understand? But again, they only start counting from when they start to do things. I'm talking about these white enemies that we have, our colonial enemies. Some people call them Europeans. I say Eurasians because Europe and Asia is just one continent. You can look it up. You can look it on the map and say, well, how come they are calling their little sliver of Eurasia its own continent? So they're calling themselves Europeans, and then we just go along with it. You can look and physically see it's all just one landmass. But then because these whites want to say that their little sliver is its own continent, we just go along with it. This is insanity. Even when your own eyes can tell you the truth, you go along with what someone has implanted in your head. You understand? So this is what we're talking about. Also, before 1,000 years before Herodotus, one of the oldest depictions of history as well, Jehuti Mes, is said to be an accurate representation of a historical method documenting how he was able to be victorious over the Eurasians in war. But how many of us learn about Jehuti Mes? Did you learn about that as you were learning about Herodotus? 1,000 years before Herodotus. So this is the child abuse that you were subjected to. You understand? And I want you to understand that that's child abuse. If you are not in a place like Abibifahodie getting this right and correct knowledge, then you are being abused. And what type of person would you be? You understand? Not you specifically.
You know, talking about Abibifahodie, I was watching one video of you and your daughter doing multiplications, 5 times 5, those things, in Chi.
Yes.
And I shared this on some platform, and people were like, wow. Right. People were just so happy. I was talking about you on radio, on Kasapa FM a week ago, last week. And then there, as soon as I mentioned your name and what you're doing with your student there, everybody came for my number. I'm like, whoa.
We have to elevate their behavior. It's not enough for them to just mentally know, oh, we can do it. Now let me send my child off to learn about these, evil white enemies that we have and not know anything about ourselves. Because again, all of the problems we complain about are a direct result of not knowing anything about yourself, but you know everything about your enemy. This is the problem. I also want to go in, this is one that we touch on often. If we look at this picture on the back of all the trotros, this imaginary white boy on a stick, right? That is actually a depiction of Cesare Borgia. Cesare Borgia. It looks like Caesar, but in Italian, the C makes a ch sound, so Cesare Borgia. So when you look at this image, that's actually you are thinking it's an image of Jesus, but it is what The Prince by Machiavelli was modeled off of. Someone who was a rapist, a murderer, a genocider. That's Cesare Borgia. That his father, that is Pope Alexander VI, decided, let's use this image. Let's use this image of my illegitimate son.
The irony of it, the Pope gave birth.
Right.
I read them like, how can the Pope have a son?
Right. So this is exactly the case, because he was considered illegitimate because the Pope wasn't supposed to apparently be sleeping with this woman and not get married to the woman and all these things. But Cesare Borgia, when Machiavelli, if you ever come across a text called The Prince, it's about how to be a wicked, conniving, deceitful individual, and is based on the behavior of Cesare Borgia. But then all of us get all dewy-eyed and teary-eyed and say, oh, look at this white boy who died for my sins. This is insanity. So just as my friend on Facebook, my elder brother, I would say on Facebook said, what if none of that is true? You understand this idea of Adam and Eve, that every single African people have a creation story, every single one. And I had one of my students who took philosophy at UG. He said he never learned his creation story, and he never even thought about it until he came to my class, Foundations of African Thought. And it really dawned on him that how come everybody only knows this rib story, Adam, Eve story, that this is, again, more of that child abuse. Now, if anyone called Jesus ever existed, he could go 3,000 years before in order to find his entire story carved in stone at the Temple of Ipet-Sut, what is often called Karnak, because the idea of Immaculate Conception, you'll see it carved in stone there. The idea of Annunciation by Jehuti, every single aspect of this Immaculate Conception and divine birth is carved in stone 3,000 years before, because that's what they plagiarized it from.
Before the
fake imaginary Jesus was, how can you even say something, let's say created, because it's based on the story of Heru, and the depiction of Heru is just talking about the movements of the sun.
Is the same, is Heru's the same thing as Horus.
Right, that's what the Greeks call Horus, but the original name by the African people themselves is Heru. Of course, we know that white people can't pronounce anything correctly, so they'll hear Nkrang, and they'll say Accra. They'll hear Chibi, they'll say Kibi. What are you talking about? You can't even pronounce anything right. So we come here and say, oh, they taught us about Nyame. If you go to the Queen of England and say the word Nyame to her, she doesn't even know what it is. So how can someone come and tell you about Nyame and they don't even know the word? You understand? No, they're coming to tell you about some creature called God, an imaginary white boy in a cloud, you understand, who's mad and jealous and puts commandments and will burn you in hell forever.
Hold on.
So this is what we're talking about.
Why would he say he's jealous? Jealous of what?
So this is what their own book says. It says that it's a jealous God. You should have no other gods before me. All this insanity, you understand? So this is what they themselves are telling you. And just the idea that this is a man up in a cloud. Now, when you look at African concepts of a creator, you have something like Ata na Nyongmo. So Ata, father, na, mother, right? This is the idea. How can you create life unless you have a man and a woman, male and female? How can you be a creator? If I put a man and put him off in a closet and say, go create a baby, how can he create life by himself? If you put a woman, put her in a closet for a year and say, come out with a baby, how can she create that baby by herself? That we know that the order as it is now is the order as it has always been. You require masculine and feminine. And that's the deep thought, which is very scientific in terms of the understanding of the creator in African thought. If you look at the Ewe, they say Mawu Lisa. So Mawu, that is the feminine, and Lisa is the masculine. But then people will take a Ewe Bible, because what are they doing? They don't even know the language. How are they going to write the thing? You understand? But then they'll say Mawu, and then they'll say he. Mawu is the feminine one. You understand? This is the insanity. Then you have Erade Nyankopon. Erade is the feminine, and then Nyankopon is the masculine. If you go all throughout the continent, you'll see this, and actually have a gold weight. So before we were using Ghana cedis or dollars, because some places here in Ghana charge dollars, we use gold weights to weigh the gold dust, and actually have a gold weight
Let me see.
of Erade Nyankopon. I'm pulling it out right now, because you'll be like, oh, this guy must be making this up. But you see the triangle with the spiral inside of it. The triangle with the spiral inside of it. I'm not going to give it to you because I had one before and someone walked away with my Erade Nyankopon.
Oh, gosh.
What kind of character is this? At University of Ghana, I passed it around to the students and it never came back. What is this? But this is, you see this triangle with the spiral inside of it. This is an ancient one. You can see this is one that was actually used to weigh taku.
Okay.
So
in Ghana.
In Ghana, right? And what the triangle represents, that's the Erade side, and it represents the womb of the female. The womb, right? That's Erade. And then the spiral represents the sperm of the male. That's Nyankopon. And the idea is that to create life, to be the creator, it requires both feminine and masculine. This is a deep philosophical concept, a deep scientific concept. But what these white boys are giving you is, here's a white man in the sky who's just, boom, popping stuff. Like, what is it, a magician? What is this? What is this, Houdini? He just, bam, he's creating this, he's creating, and then he gets tired. How can you be the creator of the universe and you're tired? What in the world is that? So you need to rest on Sunday? So all of this is the insanity. And then people talk about the invention of monotheism by so-called fake Jews. But before there was anything called that, you had Akhenaten, you understand, who actually came with this idea of what I would say exclusionary monotheism, to say that there should be no other divinities. But even before that, in the book of Coming Forth by Day, about 200, 300 years before that, you have this idea of Amen-Ra as the one who has no second, the one but with many arms. This means that everything you see is just a manifestation of Amen-Ra. Amen being that which is hidden, and Ra being that which is manifest. That's the complementary opposites. If you combine
in history, we were taught that Amen-Ra is the Egyptians' god, sun god.
So this is the problem if you try to translate any of these terms into a white concept, because there's what's called conceptual baggage, right? These big duffel bags that the word God comes along with. You're trying to get into the train and you can't, because you have all these big concepts that you've already gotten sunk into your head. So we have to come with what was the understanding of the people themselves, you understand? And the way to do that is through primary sources, right? What did we write down? We carved it all in stone thousands of years ago, but how many of us even know it exists before we could even get to read it? But all of that is there. We know about Einstein, but we don't know about Imhotep. Einstein predating, Imhotep predating Einstein by a good 4,000 years, right? Much less have we read anything written by Imhotep. Has anyone here read anything written by Imhotep?
What?
I've not
So,
done
I
typical
understand.
reading.
I understand
Read
that's
some
rhetorical.
I just read some few quotes and
Watch some
read about
videos.
him,
Yeah.
So this is exactly what I'm getting at, and it's through no fault of our own until we've heard it. Now you've heard it. Next time I see you, it will be your fault if you haven't read anything by him. Now, we learn about Hippocrates as the father of medicine, but the oldest doctor, there were contemporaries, Imhotep and Hesi Ra. You understand? Imhotep and Hesi Ra as the first doctor. So how come all the doctors have to cite the Hippocratic Oath, but ask any of the doctors in Ghana, a single one, have you ever heard of Hesi Ra? You can see a depiction of him with a big afro. It looks just like your own. And that will tell you the reason why they haven't heard of Hesi Ra. If we go to Harjadef, his book is only come down to us in a fragmentary form. That's why they don't count that as the oldest book. But that one even predated the instructions of Ptah-hotep. But you can read it in translation. Everybody, if you go to Oxford, right, they have SOAS. If you go to University of Chicago, Brown, all these Ivy League schools, this is what they do is they translate those texts. So all your white enemies know it. You have to go to the London Museum to even get a copy to read. So the ones who are setting in London, British, they're coming to set up your miseducation system, but they decide to leave that out. Why? Because they need to create anti-Africans, and that's exactly what they do. So we'll hear of Socrates, but we don't know Harjadef, right? And we can continue. We'll hear about Mary and Jesus, but we won't hear about Asar and Heru. When the story of Aset, it predates any kind of Mary by thousands of years, at least a good 1,000 years. We can go into Kagimni. We won't hear of Kagimni, but we'll hear of Plato. I've read the instructions of Kagimni, but again, that's in fragmentary form. So I can just go on that we'll hear about Shakespeare, but we won't hear about Ptah-hotep. If I ask anyone on the street, who is Shakespeare? Oh, yes, a great poet. I say, who is Ptah-hotep? They'll say, oh, bless you, you sneezed. What is going on here? This is the insanity that creates these anti-Africans that are walking around. And it's not enough to know that we have anti-Africans walking around, but this is what we see in our society right now. Someone who can shoot someone who looks black because they're worthless as they are, right? If you think you've never done anything, you see someone who's black, you just hit them with your car. Who cares, right? But if you know that this is someone who's valuable, you look exactly like Ptah-hotep, how can I treat you in that way? You look exactly like Hesi Ra, how can I treat you in that way? But we don't know, so we say, oh, you don't look like a white man, so I'll treat you anyhow. Wenis, the oldest religious text. How many of us have read the pyramid text of Wenis? Now, how many of us has read the King James Bible? That's the one that is plagiarized from. You understand? We won't hear of Pesachet. That's the first female physician in the history of the world. But we'll hear about Florence Nightingale, right? What type of person does that create? The same thing that we're creating, anti-Africans, those who will fight tooth and nail against black people and against black causes and against black car companies and against anything that's black in order to serve their white master who looks just like Florence Nightingale. When Merkel comes down and say, oh, you look just like Florence Nightingale, let me do this deal for you. This is the problem that we're suffering from. We won't hear about Mary Carré, which talks about social relations, but we'll hear of Karl Marx. Mary Carré predating Karl Marx by a good 3,800 years. I hope you're following along. I don't want to bore you, but I want to give you some of these names, and everybody in your listening audience should be taking notes. If you haven't heard it before, write it down and follow up, right? Because this isn't a church. I don't want you to believe anything. I want you to go do your own research. That is the thing. We'll hear about Queen Elizabeth. Has anyone ever heard of Queen Elizabeth?
Of course.
Of course, of course. How many of us have heard of Sobek Neferu?
No.
The very first female ruler in the history of the world. 1800 BCE. This is a good 3,500 plus years, 3,800 thereabout years before there was ever anything called a Queen Elizabeth. So what exactly are we dealing with? If we talk about literature, Sanhat, one of the greatest epic stories and probably the first epic story in the history of the world, Sanhat. If you want to, you can even read it in Fanti. It's been translated into Fanti. But we won't hear of that, but we'll hear of Homer, right? And the Odyssey, right? Odysseus. We'll know about all that. Oh, yeah, of course. But how many of us have read Sanhat? What type of human being does that create? Does it even create a human being? Or does it create a white man in black skin, an anti-African, who was willing to fight tooth and nail against every black cause? These are the colleagues who I have to deal with because they don't know it. Look at how they treat each other. Look at the society. Everything we complain about is as a result of this intentional process to make sure you will have heard of Queen Victoria. Have you heard of Queen Victoria?
Yeah.
Have you heard of Queen T or Hatshepsut?
No.
This is the problem. Now, when you look at their pictures, you'll say that they look just like your mother and your sister. You can look. Can you see her? She looks just like my wife.
Right? Just like my mom.
You see? And that's the reason why you've never heard of her. You can date it. All of this information is there. You understand? If you just do a Google search and you type in Hatshepsut, you'll find out that that's all they're researching at this college in London, at Berlin Museum, at the Turin Museum in Italy, at the Louvre in Paris. This is what they do every single day. And they call it Egyptology. And you have people who do PhDs and have conferences, and this is all they research is your black African ancestors. But when they come to set up your miseducation system, oops, perhaps they forgot to bring that, right? They just left it in the museum by mistake. No.
Doc, now let's narrow it down to
No problem.
Ghana.
Yes.
Now, the decision to bring Volkswagen at a time where Kantanka, earlier on, they were, oh, his car is handmade, so it's not this and that. This man has gone for money, bought and established an assembling plant in Ghana. It is this at the time when the government see it's wise to bring Volkswagen to Ghana. All these years where Ghana didn't have any assembly plant, where was Volkswagen?
This is
and what makes it bit so difficult for me is, so this is a government where the manufacturer of the local manufacturer of cars daughter is a member of the government. So it's really, I don't know.
Right.
And Lewe will say, I can't think far.
I can't think madness.
I can't think madness.
Right.
So how do we go about this?
Right. So this is a very good question, and I actually want to give you a little bit of background on this. So any country that has gotten to a major superpower status has practiced what's called protectionism. And I want to start with the U.S. So in 1816, the U.S. had imposed a 35% tax on most imported manufacturers. That's to protect their own industry, which rose to 50% in 1832. This is keep your goods out so that our own
At
goods.
that time.
This is in 1816 because remember they had just got their independence from Britain. So Britain has a strong industry. They could just flood the market and collapse everything in America, and it would you'll never even hear of America. But they decided we have to protect our own industries, let them grow, and then once we do that, then we can do something else. So they talk about
we can liberalize.
Exactly. So, you know, when they talk about open up your markets, they're doing it not for your interest. They're saying, we know how we got to our position, but we need to make sure you don't ever get to that position.
I don't know if you come across this book written by one Chinese economist called Kicking Away the Ladder.
No, I haven't. But I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
It details how all the superpowers, all the big developed nations got where they are. And the ladder is talking about is they use protectionism and import substitution to get to where they are economically. And when they get to the top, they kick away that ladder they used to get to the top. And that ladder is protectionism and import substitution.
Right.
They kick it away and tell Ghana, all the developing nations, that don't do import substitution. Import substitution is where you say, okay, we can produce rice. So nobody should import rice into the country. We'll buy what we produce here. That's import substitution. Protectionism is when you put the taxes, as Doc is saying, onto the imported goods. But they have used these two things to get to the top, which is the ladder they used to attain the economic heights. They kick it away. So that any crawling nation, you can't climb to where they are. They say, oh, the new term in the word is liberalization, liberal markets. When we're going liberal, what does Ghana have to trade with?
Right.
And I think that is what our president is trying to do by bringing VW into Ghana. We are not, for me, I'm not against VW just coming. But why? All these years, why now that Kantanka is now producing car in large quantities? And for our listeners, do you also know that any car you buy from Kantanka, you are charged import duty?
Yeah.
You're looking at me. Yes.
Yeah.
According to the CEO of Kantanka Automobile, Kantanka's son, if you buy any of their cars, government charges you import duty of about 25,000 Ghana cedis.
Yeah, and this is exactly what I want to deal with. So let's touch on the protectionism. There's another good documentary called The Great African Scandal that actually goes into how IMF and World Bank policies were intentionally set up to destroy industry. It goes into the rice industry, it goes into cocoa, it goes into gold industry, and how their policies were intentionally designed to destroy the rice industry by flooding the market with this cheap subsidized white rice. No nutrition, it actually destroys your body, but we'll come back to that point. So again, I mentioned 50% import taxes by 1832 in the US. Between 1864 and 1913, the US was the most heavily protected nation on the entire planet Earth and the fastest growing. That's not a coincidence, because those who practice protectionism are the ones who are going to grow. It wasn't until after the Second World War, when it had already become top dog, that it dropped most of its tariffs. The same strategy was followed by Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and almost every other country that is rich today, and that's according to George Monbiot, who is an economist. Africans, on the other hand, suffer from cultural AIDS. That means anything that enriches others while destroying Africans can get in without evaluation. We say we have an immune system, right? But the AIDS, what it does is it destroys your immune system. So now anything can come in. This is what we're seeing with the VW, is this cultural AIDS, that instead of having an immune system that can protect your body from a disease, anything can come in and destroy your body. According to United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, EU, protectionism deprives developing countries of nearly 700 billion in export income a year, because you can produce it, but they won't import it. You understand? Because they're protecting their own. That's almost 14 times more than poor countries receive in foreign aid. Almost 14 times. So they'll give you a crumb and you say, oh, look at my white benefactor. That's my savior, right? The white boy on the stick has come in person, right? But no, what they're doing is that they are destroying your economy. So we have to ask the question, are they interested in what's best, or interested in what ensures the continued existence and survival and survival, meaning that they can thrive, of themselves and their descendants? And I want to go directly to the car issue, because Chinese leaders have traditionally used limousines produced under the Hongqi brand for official events. That's a Chinese brand. The president of France can choose between several armored versions of high-end French cars, including Citroën, made in France, Renault, and Peugeot, all made in France. Now, they're not thinking abstractly, what's the best car in the world? They don't care. They say, where is my child going to be manager? In this factory right here underneath my nose? Where is my grandson going to work? Where is my granddaughter going to have her job? You understand? And all the industries that arise from that. No one cares what's the cutest car except for the anti-African who's been created by the miseducation system. You understand? We can continue. If we look at the Empress of Japan, has a specially prepared Toyota Century Royal, a one-off $500,000 custom car. Toyota, Japan. You understand? They're very clear. They're not saying Mercedes is the best car. Let's go get a Mercedes. That's what a slave would do. You understand?
Everyone who has a slave mentality will think, oh, what is the best car?
Right.
Instead of,
do I
have a car that I can use?
So this is the difference between a race-first type of mentality and a self-gratification first type of mentality. Because according to Ptah-hotep, I mentioned the oldest book in the history of the world is the Instructions of Ptah-hotep. And in the Instructions of Ptah-hotep, he says something that's very profound. And he says, Il sejem en chetef nesu chefti. And it translates to, listening to one's appetite is but allegiance to the enemy. Another translation,
no, listening to one's appetite
is allegiance to the enemy. It's oftentimes translated as one who listens to his belly belongs to the enemy. This means if you're all about self-gratification, where can I sit in the air conditioning? Where can I have this? Where can I eat what's tasty to me? Created tastes and desires. And Tree would say, that if you listen to your belly, you belong to the enemy, because it's the enemy who can provide you with the Pizza Hut. It's the enemy who can provide you with KFC. Oh, this tastes sweet. This tastes sweet. So instead of thinking, what is my own? That's race first. This is what keeps us on the Facebook. They got $1 billion, budget. At Abibifahodie, we have $1,000 budget, right? So now you say, well, this tastes good to me. So you're not about race first. You understand? You're about race last and what tastes good to me first. And they know that, and that's how they keep you enslaved. So we say we're liberating minds, but our actual behavior shows that our mentality is very low, because we're enriching our white enemies. And this is what Ptah-hotep wrote down over 4,350 years ago. Over 4,350 years ago, he taught us this. We had others like Amos Wilson who talked about created tastes and desires. He says the essence of controlling people is to provoke a desire in them and then, of course, have the control of the satisfaction of that desire. That's the foundation. You understand? So if I want to make you do whatever I want, picture a horse with the carrot in front, right? All you have to do is keep extending that carrot in front. It'll keep walking, doing what you want it to do because it needs to satisfy that taste that you've implanted in it. Where in nature would you see a horse chasing after a carrot? You understand? This is it. Another one from Amos Wilson, Nana Amos Wilson, a great ancestor. He says, oppression rests on people going places and enjoying pleasures that destroy them and who are excited by nonsense and bored by the stuff that they should be learning. In this world where things are backwards, those who are oppressed must be made to feel freest when they are most enslaved. Now, for me, he's talking about Facebook. He's talking about WhatsApp. The things that will enrich your white enemy. You know that every single click, every single like is going to Mark Zuckerberg. You're on Instagram. You're on every single thing that this white boy owns, right? That's your savior, right? That's the new white boy on the stick, right? Your digital savior. And every single thing we do, we know it. But again, enjoying pleasures and going places that destroy them and enrich their enemy. That's not race first. We need to be Kemetiu Mhat, black people in the front. But we don't do that. We say what tastes good to me, that's what's in the front. And this is what we have to know. He says, why does the black man say freedom is doing what I want to do? And why is it that everything that he wants to do enriches the European? That's a quote, right? Everything that I just happen to want to do. Oh, I want to be on this phone. I want the new Samsung. So I have a phone called KTA. That's Kwesi Chum Ampofo. It's a Ghanaian who created his own phone. Because we know ROG shut down because black people wouldn't support that one. And again, that's the end result of the process. That's not the cause. That's the end result of thinking that everything that your white enemy does is great and everything that you do is subpar and substandard. So all of these lessons have been laid down from over 4,000 years ago to just in the 90s. This is Amos Wilson talking. So again, this is what we have to know. And, you know, he asked the question of what are these tastes and desires, the things that we eat, economic production, all of these things. But I want to continue on the cause because that's our discussion for today, not so much the abstract things. So again, we were talking about on state occasions, Queen Elizabeth II usually travels in one of two armored Bentley state limousines. Now, she doesn't say, oh, maybe Mercedes is better than the Bentley. She doesn't care. She cares about what is her own. You understand? The President of the United States travels in a heavily armored, custom-built limousine, often referred to as Cadillac One. Now, he doesn't care, is a Bentley better than a Cadillac? Only slave-minded people would do that, and slave behavior people would do that. That's what I want us to focus on. I don't want people mentally free. I want people behaving like free people. Let's continue. And then again, and the question is, are they being objective of what's the best car? Are they being partial to what's my own? The president of South Korea often rides in a Hyundai Ecus VL500 limousine provided by Hyundai Motors. The current Italian presidential cars are two identical armored Lancia Thesis cars built in Italy. This is what intelligent people do. This is what intelligent people do. But what will Nana Akufo-Addo do? Perhaps he will do what unintelligent people will do. Because if you actually think these whites are smart, if you think these Eurasians are smart, you would actually do what they're doing. They're supporting their own. If you actually think that they're smart, you will do what they do.
Exactly.
But if you actually are dumb, and I don't want to say that about anybody specifically, but if you have, let's say you are stupefied, not in the sense of being shocked, but stupefied in the sense of being made intentionally stupid, because somebody gets an economic benefit out of our own stupidity, right? So there's a quote by Amilcar Cabral, cited in Baruti, says, the best way to fight an alien culture is to live your own. And Chi will say, right? Serving yourself is not to be enslaved. So this is exactly what we need. We need to stop financing our own oppression, and we need to consume what we produce and produce what we consume. But it's not enough to say that. You understand? So when I'm looking for a phone, I have to go out of my way to do that and find the Ghanaian-made phone, right? If I'm choosing an internet company, I ask, is Surfline Ghanaian-owned before I purchase it? You understand? Is it African-owned, right? Because I'm not about this teeny fragment called Ghana. which isn't even the original name of the ancient empire. It was called Ouagadougou, which translates to land of the herds in the Soninke language, also called Sarakhole. How many of us even know that Ghana isn't the original name of that empire? That's miseducation. Everybody's walking around Ghana, Ghana. Yes, it translates to warrior king, right? But that's because the Arabs didn't know the actual name of the place. That's like saying, oh, that's Trump's country. And then everybody else says, oh, yes, I'm going to Trump land. What kind of idiot is that? That was an Arab who had never even traveled to the place. He just got documents of other travelers, right? Al-Khwarizmi. Now, these are the things that we don't know, but these are what the children at Abibifahodie at Desuyambia learn, right? So they're going to be a different type of African. They're going to be the one who's not going to sell out to VW. They're going to be the types of Africans who protect our rice industry. You understand? They're going to be the ones who are fighting for African liberation instead of fighting to go serve as the footstool of some white enemy. This is the difference.
Okay, so let me announce that if you're listening anywhere and you want to contribute, ask a question, you are allowed to do so. The number to do that is 0247785 0247785 you can send us messages on that on WhatsApp, and also those of you listening live on Abibitumi, you can also send us message. You can actually also call. You can call the same number 0247785 if you want to call to contribute wherever you are. I know you can call 0247785 and enrich the program as well. We are about to end. I will want Doc Boabin will come in, but I want Doc to now take us to Abibifahodie Desuyambia. What is happening, what people need to know over there.
Very good. And we have some people online on Abibitumi, and one has his hand raised. This is Kwadjo. He's saying education is good to the extent that it solves your problems, and he gives a quote also from Nana Amos Wilson. He says, when you do not educate your children to solve the problems that will confront us, then they are being miseducated. So the purpose of education is to solve your own problems, but this miseducation, it teaches us to go and solve the problems of those in the UK as soon as we can get the visa, to go and solve the problems of the US as soon as we can get the visa, to go and solve the problems of Germany as soon as we can get the visa, Dubai. What, you know, all these people are rushing to go out and solve everybody else's problems and then leave our own. That's what miseducation does. It creates that. And then he says, anytime you turn on your own concept of God, you are no longer a free man. No one needs to put chains on your body because the chains are on your mind. That's not a John Henrik Clark, and that's also Kwadjo providing that quote. So these are very important things for us to know, and I appreciate you, Kwadjo. Also, Anderson, I see you in there. So those of you who are online, we definitely appreciate that. And I want to, as we segue into Abibifahodie Desuyambia, there's a quote also from Nana Carter G. Woodson. He says, those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from the teaching of biography and history. There's a reason why there's a field called history. There's a reason why there's an area called biography. And it's so that you will know what your forebears have accomplished. If you know what you did in the past, then you know what you can do now and in the future. But it's intentional for you to not know it, so you'll think, I can't do anything now. I can't do anything in the future. All I can do is go and consume the products of my colonial white enemies. Now, what's different is Abibifahodie Desuyambia, and what is different about it, one is that it's interactive. Not only do you have PhDs teaching your children from primary, it's that it's interactive. We also use games for learning. This is something that was written about by Plato when he said that the education of the Greeks was education for guzzling swine. This is Plato, the one who we're taught to go and clap for him. If you read the Laws by Plato, he says that the education of the Greeks is the education of guzzling swine, meaning pigs. We said to get real education that makes you more human, you have to go to Kemet, the nation of black people, to get that. And he says one of the strategies that they used in Kemet was using games for learning. So in learning something like Owari, in Owari you're learning algebra because you're solving for X. How many do I need to go to get to that specific hole? That's algebra. That's why I was teaching my daughter. So when I started teaching her algebra on the board, she was laughing and saying, oh, this is so easy. And I was laughing because I said there are some people who think algebra is hard for a 6-year-old.
I never understood anything mathematics up to university level.
There's a reason for that. That's the intentional process to make a specific type of person who's not going to compete against the Chinese, who's not going to compete against the British, who's not going to compete against the Americans because you said, oh, I can't do it. But what if you knew that the oldest mathematical instrument in the history of the world came from Africa? The oldest that's the Mbombo bone, which was found between Swaziland and South Africa. That's the oldest, 40,000 years old. We're talking about prime numbers, multiplication, division, advanced mathematical concepts, right? Prime numbers. How do you even make up that there's something called a prime number? You understand? That means that you have to know division and dividing by 2 and dividing by itself, what's going on here. 40,000 years ago, we were talking about this. Not only talking about it, but creating mathematical artifacts in order to demonstrate that. The second oldest mathematical instrument in the history of the world, again here in Africa, that's the Ishango bone, both made out of fibula of baboons, because baboons were associated with mathematics, because when you're calculating the movements of the moon, it's the baboon that howls at the moon, right? So you're saying, not only do I understand math, I understand the connection between what's in nature and the moon and my mathematical calculations. So I could have made it out of the fibula of a cow. I could have done it out of a monkey, a chimpanzee, but I'm doing it out of the baboon, so you know that I know what I'm doing. This is the animal associated with the moon. And in ancient Kemet, they depicted Jehuti, the divinity of writing and of mathematics, as a baboon. So you say, oh, look, it's idol worship. They're worshiping monkey. No, no, no. We're telling you we have a deep understanding of the connection between mathematics, of nature, and of the moon, because we're calculating the menstrual cycle. When you say menstrual cycle, you're talking about menses. You're talking about the movements of the moon. So you need to know when the woman can get pregnant, and that requires mathematical calculations so that she's not pregnant at the time where there's no rain. You understand? Where there's no food and no sustenance. We need to know when she can get pregnant so we know when the food will be abundant so that the children will survive.
Wow.
This is what we're working at 40,000 years old.
Now, Doc, I want us to do this on as a show on its own.
Abibifahodie.
What you're talking about.
If you're not bringing your children to learn this information, I'm barely scratching the surface. If you aren't bringing your children here to learn this information, you are child abuse. I'm calling Dopsu on you. I'm calling Dopsu on you. What are you doing to your children?
This is serious knowledge.
No, I want us to treat this subject about how to naturally know when to get pregnant and all of those things. Today, people are just swallowing pills just to prevent pregnancy and all of that. So I don't know if next week we can actually do that.
Even at African Studies, they had some type of program. You know, anyone who rents out the hall there can use it. And they had a hall there about this is how to the morning after pill to kill the baby. You understand? This is the African Studies, right? I hope you're following along. The ones who should be championing African causes, if you come with money, then you can hold a big bazaar about how to kill your children. Wow. But I also want to come back to what we were dealing with the cars and protectionism and things like that. This last point, because I've heard people say, well, Kantanka isn't made in Ghana. They're just importing and assembling. But how many people are aware that Apple, no one will challenge that Apple is an American company. No one will say, oh, well, that's whatever. However, 85% of all iPhone 5s are assembled in China, 15% in the rest of the world. If you look at the workforce of Apple itself, over 700,000 are elsewhere in the world compared to just, let me come back to the stats, 43,000 in the U.S.
Doc, can you, every information that you read today, can you send them to me in email?
I will send it on Abibitumi. So if you're not on Abibitumi, you're not getting
come
information.
on, I'm on Abibitumi, but
I know you're on Abibitumi.
I'm logged out for a reason.
So we need you to log in. We need you to log in. If you want the information.
Not like I have difficulty. Now I don't have difficulty logging in, but my personal laptop is messed up.
No problem.
And
no problem.
I have a problem with that.
No problem. But these are some of the stats. It's an infographic that I'm reading from, and you can find it online. I'll post it in Abibitumi on the X Live group. But 700,000 foreign-held jobs in Apple, only 700,000. That's close to 1 million, right? And 43,000. That's not even up to a tenth of a million, right? 43,000 U.S.-held jobs domestically, right? What does that tell you? But no one will say, oh, well, that's not an American company. You understand?
We pride ourselves that we are using an American phone.
Very good. And if you look at all of these things that go into an iPhone, you find that the majority of the components that are required, the color screen, the glass polishing, the speakers, vibration unit, phone circuitry. It comes from rare earth materials from Inner Mongolia. So the materials are not coming from America. The materials to make an iPhone, that 90% of the rare earth materials are coming from Inner Mongolia and China, 10% from the rest of the world. But no one will challenge and say, well, Apple isn't an American company, so let's go and buy something else. But this is the insanity that anti-Africans who are intentionally made anti-Africans will tell me about Kantanka. Well, every single part isn't made here. Can you tell me any car company where every single part is made in that country? That's ridiculous. And anyone who says that, they're just proving that they are very, I don't know what word to use that's not completely insulting. But you get the point. Picture the worst insult you can think of, and then I didn't say it. You already know. Let's say that. That's calm. So controller chips, audio chip, radio frequency, A6 chip, the brain of it, design and development plan. That one is, the design of it is what's made in Cupertino, California, based at Apple. But all these other things, you'll find them based in other places, coming from other places, all the parts, right? And the reason for it is that they moved all of these supply deadlines to China. So in 2007, Steve Jobs wanted a glass screen for the iPhone a few weeks from launching. The American supplier said the deadline was impossible. In China, a factory constructed a dormitory even before signing a contract so that its employees could work in 12-hour shifts. When the deal was sealed, 8,000 workers were roused from sleep, given a biscuit and tea, and they started fitting glass screens into the iPhone to produce 10,000 iPhones a day. That's in China. So they don't even have the assembly plant in America. And the reason why is because they would only earn $2 to $3 on every iPhone if iPhone manufacturing moved back to the US. They would earn $3. So if they're charging you $1,000, you understand? That means $997 would be going somewhere else, and the profit would be $2 to $3. So these are the things that we don't know, but I just want to give you an actual case study to show how illogical that logic is, because what people are actually doing is they're looking for excuses of how can I support my white enemy. That's the same thing that keeps us on Facebook. That's the same thing that keeps us buying all these white cars, phones, anything they produce. And what it does, it creates a spiral where the whites get richer and the blacks get poorer. We say, well, this isn't the best thing, so I'm not going to support it. Well, how can it get better if you're not supporting it in the first place? Meanwhile, the whites are saying, I'm going to support my own thing, and I'm not going to support your thing. So now we get the whites supporting white things and the blacks supporting white things, and then we say, how come we're in the position we're in? So we'll lament it. You'll hear all these people, your PLO Lumumbas lamenting and say, oh, we don't do this, and we don't do that, and we don't do this. But we don't understand what's our own behavior, part of it. Everybody says, well, don't blame the whites, we should blame ourselves. You understand? And they say this just to make sure that you don't do anything to the white enemy, because you've been conditioned and miseducated to make sure that you keep wanting to support them. But the very first thing of taking up responsibility is practicing Kemetiu Imhat, black people first. Black people first. That's what we were doing in ancient Kemet. When we were successful in ancient Kemet, when we abandoned that policy, that's when Kemet crashed. Anytime we abandon that policy, that's when we crash. Okay.
Most of the time when I tell people about homeschool and all of that, people raise a lot of questions.
They don't know what it is.
What happened to socialization? What else? A whole lot of
look at all these beautiful African children. We have African children from Ghana, African children from UK, African children from Caribbean, African children out of the US. All these African children socializing. You understand? So when they're saying, "Oh, well, you can't socialize," what are you talking about?
Now let's also look at another thing. Can you take us through the courses?
Right, absolutely.
That is taught over there vividly.
I'm going to actually give you a few of the courses, which are courses that I teach at the University of Ghana, that we actually bring to the level so that the children can understand it. And a lot of that was on the feedback that I got from some of my students at University of Ghana. They said, why did I have to wait to be 28 before I started to learn this information? And they were very mad. You know, oftentimes that's one of the reactions they get. And one is a course that I teach called Foundations of African Thought, where we were mentioning how it's child abuse that we don't learn our own creation stories. Well, in this, we actually learn the creation stories and find out where these whites plagiarized it from. You understand? We would go into the concepts of the human being, what are the concepts of character, of early childhood education and development. All of these things are foundations of African thought. What is Ma'at? You understand? Before there were 10 commandments, there were 42 declarations of Ma'at, because the whites said we can't do all 42, we'll just select 10. I hope you're following along. So this is what the children are learning. It's actually a university, a graduate course, but we've put it at the level so even children can understand and get that information. Because the students at university, they were saying, I would have lived my life entirely differently if I had known this information from childhood. So they say, well, let's do it. We have a school, let's actually give them that course. We have Chi, which I also teach at the university level. So we teach them everything in Chi. We teach them, as you mentioned, mathematics in Chi, science in Chi, biology in Chi. All of this information, we learn it in African languages because we invented these subjects.
Exactly. Doc, it looks like we've even eaten into the next show. So we'll leave it here. Next week we'll come, but next week I want us to treat that topic. It's so serious. We need to look at it. So find your final ways, and Boabin, you too. When are you going to be in Accra?
I'm hoping maybe next month or in 2 months.
Okay.
Right.
So Doc, your last word, and let's run away for the next presenter to come in.
Right. So there's a quote from Malcolm X which says, only a fool would send his children to the enemy to be educated. Only a fool would send his children to the enemy to be educated. Okay. And this is exactly what we have when we are using the Cambridge curriculum or Montessori curriculum or even the Ghanaian curriculum, because it's based on this Oxbridge type of thing, you understand? So what you're doing is you have people who are substituting their white enemies in blackface. So their skin looks black, but what they're doing is actually abusing them, you understand, mentally and physically, and making sure that they will fight against the best interests of African people and for the interests of white people, like we see with the Volkswagen factory coming down. So this is, you know, the thought I want us to really think about, and how to have respect when we don't respect ourselves. There's a quote also from Nana Malcolm X where he says, no matter where the black man is, he will never be respected until Africa is a world power. Now VW is coming to make sure that Africa won't be a world power. You understand? Cathedrals are coming to make sure Africa won't be a world power. Okay. So we won't be respected until we change something. And that change starts at Abibifahodie Adesuyabia. So you can call us, you can come to abibifahodie.org, ABIBIFAHODIE.org, and I'll also post it there. But look us up, we have videos online, and this is the change that we want to see in the world.
Bobby, for your final quick one.
All right, I want to send a message to our president, if he's listening right now, or those who know him could also send it to him. We are not happy. I mean, we have Kantankan there producing a lot of stuff. I can't understand why. I work with the government. I don't understand why we procure cars from. We import all these cars. Why can't we have a deal with Kantankan to produce these cars only for government workers? If we cannot give him that kind of mass production, only for government workers. Let the MPs, every government employee should use made in Ghana cars from Kantankan. If there's a problem with it, he would definitely fix it. He would have maybe places where he could repair if there's any problem. Definitely. So, I mean, what is this? What is wrong with us? Are we okay? What is wrong?
Charlie, we're out of time. All right.
Anyway, in addition, I just graduated from Yali Network, Young African Leaders Initiative, the Emerging Leaders Program at GIMPA, and which was just on Friday. And I want to thank all my Yali Network friends. And thank you, sir. So we are young leaders who are coming up, and we are not going to make Africa down. We are going to make Africa proud.
Thank you very much. This morning, my guest has been Dr. Obadele Kambon from the University of Ghana, Legon, the Department of African Studies, and Boabin, Advocate Boabin, also newest Yali graduate. I had my Yali graduation in 2015, so yeah, welcome to the group. All right, my name is Kwabena Benite. The show has been Good Morning Africa, and our usual guest on Monday has returned. Up next is Freddie, who is going to give you more talk, more music, and a lot of infotainment right there. I'm out.